I am so excited to welcome you not only to Jacksonville, but to the launching of the podcast called The Covenant, more specifically, the Sistah Covenant. And yes, I did say sister. What is the covenant, the Sistah Covenant? It is a circle of friends, my friends for 20, 30, 40 plus years, your friends, all of our friends, coming together in a safe space at a time such as this. We as women of color, we are counted on to nurture our families, our children, our significant others, our spouses, our community, our corporate boardrooms, and everything in between. But who fills our cup? I think about flying, and when we get ready to take off, what is said to us first? Put your oxygen mask on first before you can assist others. And that exactly is what the Sistah Covenant is all about. A safe space to encourage, to listen, to cry a little, laugh a lot, but most important, to empower and to fill our cup. Good morning. Great Sunday morning, and welcome to the 24th episode of the Sistah Covenant. We are just super excited to have you with us this Sunday, and as always, we have a jam-packed, powerful podcast. But before we get to that, just a few housekeeping things that we need to cover. So again, we thank you for all of your support and purchasing your Sistah Covenant apparel. There it is, that beautiful apparel. And if you don't have all of it, it is not too late. As you know, if you spend more than $100, $10 will go directly to UNCF. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, for their emergency fund. In the next month or so, we are going to invite Gwen Hewitt back to the Sistah Covenant to talk about how the Sistah Covenant can partner with them to make sure these students are taken care of all across the country as we return to our campuses all over. We want to make sure these students have the scholarships and all of the tools necessary to be successful. And the Sistah Covenant wants to be a part of that. So you're going to hear more about that over the next couple of weeks. Also, we thank you for being a part of our Sistah Circle on Facebook. As you know, we don't always complete all of the powerful dialogue on the podcast. So join us in the after conversation as a part of the Sistah Circle. Very simply, you open Facebook on your phone, your smartphone, or your computer, search the Sistah Covenant, find the groups tab, click on the group title, the Sistah Circle, and click join. It is just that simple. Now, it is my pleasure to get right to it. And I want to invite to the studio, Dr. Anita. Dr. Anita is our medical contributor, and you know her well as one of our most powerful sisters. Good morning, Anita. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. You are on the front line, and we appreciate you. Dr. Anita, welcome. Great Sunday morning.
How are you?
I am doing well. I am doing well, but better question, how are you? I know you are on the front line of this COVID 2.0, as I've been referring to it. What are you seeing down in South Florida?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm seeing more COVID now. We're having patients that are unvaccinated who are getting COVID. We're also having some breakthrough cases of those who have already been vaccinated and who are getting COVID. And unfortunately, I've had a few patients pass away from COVID more recently. So we're quite busy again. I even have some colleagues who are working in the emergency room now because they're overloaded, and so are the hospitals. So they're requiring some work from some outside physicians. So we're back with this variant, this more transmissible, and so it's a little bit of a hardship, I'd say. No joke for sure. And we want to do all that we can to know and continue to learn about COVID, get rid of some of the misinformation regarding COVID. Definitely, from my standpoint, answer questions for patients that I see to make sure that they can make an informed decision. It's definitely a personal choice, I still say. However, you need to make an informed decision. And I am an advocate for vaccinations, for prevention. So it's a tough thing, Pat. But we're here, we're working, we're doing everything that we can. Thank God for you and our guests that are going to help to dispel some of the myths and help us to understand what's going on regarding COVID at this time.
Dr. Anita, we just appreciate you being on the front line and taking a few minutes out of your work day. Actually, you're working today. Tell us about the myths. What are you hearing, and how are you counseling your patients around some of the myths? Everything from the vaccination will make a woman sterile to, I've heard a lot of myths, so I know you have. What are you hearing?
So I've heard about the sterile infertility myth, which is not true. I've also heard that it'll transform your DNA, which is not true. Well, it does not enter the cell to transform any DNA. I had a patient today ask me, well, if I get the and this is someone who's been diagnosed, well, if I get the vaccine at this point, what does it matter? I've already had COVID. So having a conversation about possibly being reinfected, which is rare but can occur, about not knowing how long our antibodies last once we've been diagnosed with COVID, and that the best way to not only keep herself safe, but those that she knows safe as well, is getting a vaccination. And I think the most important thing for me is if I have someone who asks me a question. I had one person say, oh, can I become a mummy from this? I heard that you become mummified after you take the vaccine. And I definitely told her that was not true as well. I've heard this is an experiment on us. And it's not, there's a lot of science. The vaccination method, the messenger RNA, has been around for a long time. The science has been around for a long time. And then there are committees that actually research and search and give approval and follow the data. So I just think that now, hopefully, if we do have questions, and even if my patients have questions, I make sure that we ask every visit with every patient, number one, to see if they've had the vaccine, and if they haven't, why not? And can we answer any questions that they may have so that they can make a decision to go ahead and be vaccinated. I'm actually seeing whole households with COVID-19. So one person gets it, and next thing you know, their whole household actually has COVID-19.
Dr. Anita, the powerful conversation we had with Dr. Holder 2 weeks ago was just that, powerful. So I think, and we've talked about this, that it's worth us replaying. And we know we had a few technical glitches, so our amazing staff has cleaned some of that up. So we want to rebroadcast that. But before we do that, over the last 2 weeks, we've heard the numbers go up as it relates to teens as we are approaching school, and some of the counties in Florida here, we're going back to school. Duval County went back to school yesterday. We're also seeing a surge in individuals, 30-year-olds in that age group. Are you seeing more of that in your practice, those age groups?
So I care for adults. I'm an internal medicine physician. So I am seeing younger people being diagnosed at this point, especially those who are unvaccinated. So the answer to your question is overall, yes, we know that younger people are getting COVID now from the variant. And we also know that children can be diagnosed with COVID as well. But that's where the preventive strategies should be implemented amongst all of us to prevent COVID, whether it's vaccination, wearing your mask. If you're unvaccinated, definitely wearing your mask and staying 6 feet apart, that physical distancing, washing your hands, respiratory etiquette where you kind of, sneeze into or cough into your arm. And if you're sick, stand away from people, stand away from either school, if you're the teacher or an administrator, or if your child is sick, keeping your child home and being tested as well. So the overall answer to your question is yes, I am seeing younger people diagnosed with COVID and dying actually from COVID. I've had a death of a young person recently.
Yes, here in Duval County this week, we had a 16-year-old to pass away. So all of the noise, unfortunately, from the school boards across the state as well as the country around mask and not wearing mask, and certainly getting that vaccination if you are able to do so. Like you, I am certainly an advocate, and the Sistah Covenant is an advocate of doing just that. So we have the honor of replaying or rebroadcasting our segment with Dr. Cheryl Holder, who is an internal medicine doc and a great friend of yours of many years. And I just think this is information that we can't hear enough of. So with that, let's hear what Dr. Holder has to say to us. Talk to us, Dr. Holder, about where we are today and where we need to be to get ahead of this virus.
Well, it's a great point in that so many of us thought, and I say so many of the lay people who thought that we were moving behind us. Now, when you look at the science, and as many times we're saying, please trust the science, that virus is an organism just like humans who want to live. Viruses want to keep living. And every time it gets into a body and replicates, it is trying to find the best way to infect as many cells as possible. So if it comes up against a barrier, just like humans come up against a barrier, we find a way to get around that barrier. That is what viruses do. So this variant is not a surprise. As we continue to have replications, there will be more and more of these will, as some people think, sneak up on us. But as the science says, it is expected because that's what organisms do. So we did not handle the initial Wuhan variant as well. So we continue to have replication. And we're going to see these Delta variants, and Lambda might be on its way unless we come together as a community and understand what we have to do.
So that was awesome. Thank you for sharing a little bit about the Delta variant and the Lambda that's up and coming. We would like to have a little bit more information about those, along with the numbers. Can you tell us the numbers are rising and people are concerned? Can we talk a little bit about the numbers? And can you just kind of expand your discussion a little bit on the variants, please?
Okay. If everyone understands the original virus, and a lot of folks don't quite realize that when that first Wuhan variant showed up, that Wuhan virus that came out in late 2019 and took over the world in 2020, we responded this way because it's novel. When we say novel, new, no one in the entire world had ever seen this virus before. So we were like babies. Babies get about 7 cold infections. It's a similar in the family. 7 a year because their bodies have never seen those cold viruses. So the entire world was like a baby, like children getting lots of viral infections. So we were prone. There's no natural immunity to this thing. You are going to either get it and build up your immunity. So we used that concept of building your body's immunity to fight an infection. And that's where the concept of vaccines came from. So every time from that original Wuhan virus, which then changed. We went through alpha and beta. We had gone through other variants before, but they just weren't as infectious as this one. This variant, because it's been fighting all the different types of, it's been in so many people in the world. It started in India because India had a rapid production and infection. India has almost 2 billion people. So you can imagine when a virus is going through so many billion people changing, one is going to emerge as a stronger one. And that's what happened with Delta. And with our international travel, it gets around the world rapidly. So we ended up with this Delta variant. The Delta variant is interesting in that when it gets into your nostrils and into your mouth and your lungs, we have receptors that captures the virus, and then it gets into our cells and into other cells and cause the immune system to start fighting. This Delta variant is able to latch on a lot easier and rapidly grow. So we are finding high levels of this virus in people who are vaccinated, unvaccinated, running in all the different receptors, high levels. If you have a lot of virus in your body, you will get sicker. So it's basic science in that you get a lot of stuff on you that's not good, you're not going to do well. And that's our big push, why we are now saying everyone should get vaccinated, because the vaccine gets your body starting to fight. And so when you get an infection like the Delta variant that rapidly replicates, overwhelms the body, you already have those fighting cells to control it so you don't get as sick. So it's not difficult to see why we say do something to build up your immune system. I wish I had a pill. I wish I had food. I wish I had moringa or something that would do it. We really have nothing but introducing into your body a little bit of something that says to the body, this is what coronavirus looks like. And if you ever see something like this come back in you, get ready to fight. And that's what we do with vaccines.
Dr. Holder, that was an awesome explanation of the life cycle of a virus, the Delta variant, infectivity, absolutely. And I know that you're seeing more COVID-19 like I am, infections now. And then, you know, we've been doing this for what, about 17 months. So let's talk a little bit, change gears just a tad and talk a little bit about long haulers. We're seeing them as well. Can you explain what long COVID is or what long haulers are?
Yeah, that's just, you know, any infection after most viruses, if anyone has ever had the flu, I always say it's like being hit with a sledgehammer and it takes you a little while to recover. Think of this coronavirus. If you get it pretty badly, it's like hitting with 2 sledgehammers, and it takes your body a while to calm down from this massive response of the immune system. Because think about it, you have millions of these viral particles. Your body now has to make probably 3 times as many of those fighting cells. So we got trillions of cells fighting each other, wearing down your system. The virus goes in your brain, the virus goes in the muscle, the virus goes in the joints, the virus goes in the liver, the virus goes everywhere. The nervous system. So once the fight is over and you're recovering, the rest of your body has to heal. And unfortunately, this Delta variant, because the viral load is so high and the impact is so tremendous, we're seeing more and more people take longer to recover. So we call it the long haulers, because could be 6 months, 7 months later that you're still tired. You can't walk up a flight of stairs like you used to. Your brain doesn't quite work as well. And I tell the doctors and the medical students, most doctors, you know, are vaccinated, because we make our money and our lives and what we do and our passion is through our brains. There's no way we want to take on a virus that's going to make us weak and sick. So this long haulers is the major concern that we see, especially we're seeing it in children too, where they're just not back to being able to play at the level they used to play. Most people do well, but this is new. We don't know what's going to happen. The first group of the Wuhan folks who are they're now getting better after a year and a half, but they didn't get the same hit like the Delta variant hit. So we're going to wait and see how the Delta variant people recover. We have some folks who've had strokes from both types, and that's one of the hardest things because so many of the 60, 70-year-olds who got the strokes, the families are now working with them to get them back. And that's really difficult on the family. So the long haulers is so concerning because now with the Delta variant, it's younger people who we're seeing. And so when you have 30s, 40s, 50s, that's their peak earning years. That's their peak family productive years. Now we're looking at older people taking care of these younger people as they recover. And the children, who's taking care of the children of this 30 to 50-year-old. So this is a very crucial population that we really can't afford to lose, whether dying or from chronic debilitating illness. We can't afford to lose any age, but this age becomes such a key in continuing the generation and key in keeping the families together. So the push is on. We've figured out how to save our older people because most older people are vaccinated. Now it's that 30, 50-year-old that we've got to make the push. The younger generation, because they've had so many cold viruses, by the time they're that age, their immunity is still kind of good. So we're looking that perhaps it's the immunity issue that they're younger, so they can fight off the virus. They don't get a large load. So children under puberty tend not to get as sick. But remember, the Delta variant has been killing children because there's so much and it overwhelms them. Newborns all the way through because the virus has changed.
Dr. Holder, you and I have talked, and this has hit home for me personally. What are the numbers of vaccinated folks countrywide right now, specifically in the African American community?
Well, I tend not to have absolute numbers. We have vaccinated hundreds of millions of Americans. I know the numbers in total infected, about a third of the American population. There are over 300 million. We've had 34 million plus people infected with this virus, which is, we're number one in the world. We do have more older people, and in the early rounds, because their immune system's not as strong, we lost a lot of older people. We also have more chronic diseases, and we have populations that have not had access to adequate health care for so long. And so that made them more vulnerable to not understanding the information that it came, not having trusted messengers. A lot of our poorer people don't have any doctors to talk to. So when we get in the Black community, because there's much more skepticism, because of hundreds of years of oppression and misunderstanding and abuse, you do make yourself to be healthily skeptical. Healthy, not even skeptical, healthily in asking any health system that has not treated you well, really, let me step back. Is this really safe for me? Because in the past, I have not had the best healthcare. Nobody has done the best for me. So this is a very healthy response that we've seen in Black and Brown communities because they've continued to work. They've not been fortunate enough to have these high income jobs where they can stay home on the computer and stay away from other people. Most of the poorer people had to go out and work. So the more you go out, the more you're going to get exposed. Most poorer people and folks live in closed, smaller homes with lots of different families, multi-generational families. So they're going to get more exposure at work and home. But their immune system wasn't as strong. They got infected twice. So this is what we're seeing in population. So yes, as a percentage of people, Black and Brown people have gotten the most of this, bearing the brunt of this infection and bearing the deaths, and now will bear the long haul syndrome. So that's why I am so happy you're having these programs, because it is going to be especially the women and the families who are looking at taking on the load as we care for the children and care for the older people, and now caring for the 30 to 50-year-olds. We know the numbers, everyone has seen it. Black and brown people are more impacted, but not because of our skin color. The science has shown that we're all the same race. And just like I tell my patients, if you can understand the science behind DNA and what makes us all the same race, I think we can understand the science behind a group of people that our society have denied access to health. The society has denied access to good jobs. The society has forced us to live in areas that are polluted, forced us to live in areas where we can't get access to good, healthy food. So that's what separates us, not some sort of DNA issue that somebody wants to call white race and black race. So if you can understand that science, you can understand when I talk about putting a little bit of this thing in us to tell our bodies to make the fighting cells. And as we work together, it makes it easy to realize, yeah, I need to get my body ready to fight. And they can more accept the vaccine.
Dr. Holder, that was so insightful. We've had a little challenge this morning with technology, but certainly what we got from everything you've said this morning is we need to fight. There are lots of resources out there, with the vaccination being one of them, but we've even seen with the breakthrough cases that have come about most recently of fully vaccinated folks. I don't know if you can talk to us just in our closing moments a little bit about that, because that's another skepticism, if you will, out there where people are saying, I see it doesn't work, so I'm not going to get it. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
That's the other thing. Breakthrough is expected. I wish they'd never called it breakthrough, because again, the science of the vaccine clearly said this vaccine was to prevent death and severe disease. That's what it said from the very beginning. Prevent death and severe disease. That was the outcome goal when they made this vaccine. When they brought it through the system, it says rapid, but I say we should do that rapid way of getting vaccines for every other disease that we see. When you have political will and money, you get a vaccine in a year. So we need political will and money. And I think so much of our health problems that we're seeing in our poorer communities could definitely be solved. So this breakthrough is expected, not 100% coverage. The vaccine was never 100% in keeping everybody well. It protects you from severe disease and protects you from death. And all the people that we now see, the majority of the folks who are infected are unvaccinated. The ones who are getting breakthrough have often been vaccinated earlier, which is when it starts to wane, or they've had transplants or other immune deficiencies, and older people who the immune system is just not strong enough to fight this Delta variant. So the vaccines are working as they were designed, working as predicted. So breakthrough is anticipated, maybe not as the extent that we see, but we didn't plan on the Delta variant. This vaccine was developed with the concept of the other variant, but they work well. They work incredibly well to prevent severe disease and death. And every country that has been vaccinated, when they get the Delta variant, even Israel, which is showing a breakthrough at a higher rate, Israel you don't see the deaths and severe disease as you see with unvaccinated. So this is not a reason to say, don't take it. This is even more of a reason to say, I got to take this vaccine, because it absolutely works as the scientists said. It protects me from severe disease and it protects me from death. And there's very little medicines and things that are out there that has proven itself in a year to do exactly what we said it is. Our communities suffer from diabetes, high blood pressure, so many health issues that take so many other medicines that definitely don't work as well as what we've seen with this vaccine. So check it and see. We went through this with HIV, similar things. We got multiple drugs over and over before we could get the potent drugs that we now have to bring that HIV viral load down. That took us 30 years. So we have in 1 year something that has brought us to be able to prevent severe disease and decrease the death That's amazing science. And that's what we should celebrate rather than saying, oh, it doesn't work. Yes, it works. It works just the way we predicted. And for that, I'm really grateful to God, because science, as we know, is something that is revealed to us, and it does happen out of nowhere. It is often the work of our God that helps man to get to where we are now. And so I just give thanks that this vaccine worked as well as it does.
Thank you, Dr. Holder. Thank you for that. Dr. Anita, I know you're down in Miami as an internal medicine doc, right on the front line as well. So please, I give you the last question for Dr. Holder this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dr. Holder, that was phenomenal, by the way. Thank you. You just broke it down to the minimum level so we all could completely understand why we should get a vaccine. After hearing all of your explanation, please talk to someone who still may be sitting on that fence and may not want to get that vaccination. Do you have a couple of words you could share with us?
I say, talk to yourself and look at it. I use how we help you. Look at the risks, look at the benefits, and what's the alternative. And this virus has given us a huge challenge. That when you look at the risk of the virus and look at the risk of the vaccine, the benefits greatly outweigh it. No one knows long-term effects of either. I say I go with the vaccine because it works with our natural immunity. It works with the way that most diseases, when we build on what God has given us, our natural sense. And this concept of vaccine comes from hundreds of years from a slave who told a master about putting a little bit that they did back in Africa. And they told in the New World, that little inoculation makes your body start fighting. So when we do that in modern technology, it's the same old thing. Your body starts to fight. So I say, look at the risks, look at the benefits, and what is your alternative? A life of being masked, staying away from family and friends, because you're going to put somebody at risk? When you look at it that way, because we love each other, and I can see, I worked for 30 plus years in our communities, and I know the tremendous love and support that we have for each other, especially since so much of us have gone through challenging lives because of poverty and illness. And that love is going to help you to understand the risks and the benefits and the alternatives. And once you do it, you'll see that the vaccine gives you so much more benefit for the short term. And then for the long term, that's where faith and our belief in God and our belief in knowing that through all we will be well and it will be okay.
That was absolutely phenomenal. All the explanations were on the bottom shelf, were broken down to the least common denominator so that all of us could understand. And hopefully, from listening to Dr. Holder, we'll have a better understanding about why we should be vaccinated at this point. And if we know someone who hasn't been vaccinated, that we direct them to listening to the podcast to understand a little bit more about COVID, the variants, and why we need to be vaccinated. So I absolutely encourage everybody who's been listening, if you haven't been vaccinated, please consider being vaccinated at this point to prevent death, severe disease, please, and hospitalizations. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Anita. Again, thank you for taking time away from your busy schedule. And thank you for what you're doing as a medical professional on the front line and a dear, dear, dear sister, lifting your powerful voice every day.
It's my absolute pleasure. My pleasure, Pat. Thank you for what you do and providing the platform. God bless you.
God bless you. Well, we are privileged to have Dr. Holder join us again. We had an opportunity to sit down with her, and she is a wealth of information, and she's going to talk with us about climate change and how it impacts our community, marginalized communities and communities of color. I am super excited to welcome back to the Sistah Covenant, Dr. Cheryl Holder. Dr. Holder is a board certified internal medicine doctor who has dedicated her medical career to serving underserved populations. And she so enlightened us just a couple of weeks ago in reference to COVID-19, the vaccination, and COVID-19 2.0. So welcome back, Dr. Holder. Thank you for coming to the Sistah Covenant.
Good morning, Pat. Thank you for inviting me back. I love this program, so I'm always ready to be here. Thank you.
You are a wealth of information, and we're going to get straight to it. I had the opportunity and pleasure to listen to a TED Talk that you did recently in reference to climate change and health equities or inequities and how it impacts climate change, marginalized communities, specifically those of color. So talk to us about that. I've never even thought about it in the context in which you lifted when I heard that presentation.
Yeah, thank you for watching the TED Talk, and I hope more people do, because climate change we've heard about for so long, and we heard the planet is warming, and many times all of us think about those polar bears stranded on a block of ice, and we never quite realize how important it is and how it is like the coronavirus pandemic, like previous major catastrophes that's on our population that is happening now, and who's feeling the brunt of it right now are primarily those who are Black and brown, folks who are lower income because of so many factors. We know that the climate has warmed because so much greenhouse gases has been man-made through all our industrializations, through our cutting down the Amazon and cutting forests and doing all the things that we have done, and our explosive population growth worldwide on this planet has led to warming. And with that warming, we've seen lots of health consequences from the warming, and the changes that has happened in our weather has led us to causing tremendous health impacts. And those who are most at the vulnerable level, who are most out working outdoors, who are living in areas that are closest to the sea level and closest to the warming, are suffering right now.
So Dr. Holder, you've talked even about during this pandemic and how some folks that are in various career paths and how they've been impacted. We've heard about folks on the front line. We've heard about folks that are in the service industry, but just talking about folks that may have to choose between meds and paying their electrical bill, and how not paying their electrical bill can really be a health hazard as it relates to climate control.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about the first patient that really, this was about 2016, the first patient that kind of awakened me to what was going on with this heat. And since I live in Miami, heat has always been part of what we live in. Yet when my patient came in and her COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, was worsening, and she needed more medications, so she also needed to use a little AC that she had in her old house to try and keep her cool, because we knew the heat and the mold and the humidity, everything was triggering her breathing problems. So she tried to help herself as much as possible. And so when she came in to see me, she just wanted refills because she couldn't really keep up with everything she was doing. And then her light bill was so high. So for a simple question asking me to complete this light bill application, and I know many of us don't even realize that FPL, many of our utilities corporations, will provide some assistance to people who have health conditions that if they lost electricity, because they would cut their electricity if they hadn't paid it, they would get some assistance. And then when I connected all the dots, I'm realizing that this poor woman has been living in a condition that was out of her control, that came from a series of things that we've done in our society. And she's feeling it now. And how much help is our society willing to give her? Because the light bill will only be for a little bit. But what are we going to do? And so I started seeing more patients whose asthma were aggravated because they live next to highways and from all the pollution. And then I have outdoor workers. And some of my outdoor workers, I started seeing, because it's so hot, they don't get ability to go stay in the shade. They can't drink enough fluids. And many of these jobs didn't really accommodate some of the needs, especially outdoor workers with diabetes. And I would start seeing the sugars getting more out of control and the kidneys function worsening because they were chronically dehydrated and affecting the kidneys. So I saw kidneys happening. I saw more allergies. And these were often poor people who really, when you go deeper, you get to understand that how do we end up living and working in the environment that we do? And when you look at all the policies that drives where people live, where people work, how much money they have, what insurance access to healthcare they have, you see how the policies and how the racism and how the discrimination has piled on top of the most vulnerable people. I want you to think about if you've gone into some of our inner cities, in any city, even in Florida, the trees that you would go into a lovely, rich neighborhood and see, all those trees, that cools that neighborhood, sometimes 4 or 5 degrees difference. Yet when you go into the poorer neighborhoods, they don't maintain trees, they don't plant trees, they pave everything. And many of this population were forced to live there, especially when you look at Florida and the Jim Crow legislation. Many poor populations, Black and brown people, are forced to live in the worst environment. So you may be living in a place with no trees. It's hotter than usual, and we already know it's hot. Then you're surrounded by highways because highways were often put between poor Black neighborhoods. And then the polluting industries were often placed in neighborhoods that they felt would have least resistance and least power. So when you look across the world, especially in the US, if you look around the cancer belt, you look where they place most of the dumps, where they put most of the incinerators and grain elevators and anything that requires a lot of truck traffic and transportation traffic were often poor communities. So these communities developed all these health problems, and now with the warming climate are incredibly vulnerable to all the effects of mold and mildew and the effects of the things that's changed, that's been moving into our environment because it's warm. Think about, we had a Zika infection. Now Zika comes from mosquitoes that are in our environment, but because it's warmer, mosquitoes are living and being able to reproduce even more. And they are carrying diseases that we never really experienced. We had Zika, we have more West Nile, we have chikungunya, we have in some parts of the US, you're going to see even more parasitic and other types of infection because the climate has warmed and the insects that would normally live further south in the US is moving up north towards us. So and who again lives in an environment that we cannot say, let's just close the windows. If you can't afford AC, you're not going to close your windows. And if you have windows in apartments and they didn't put any screens on the windows, they're still going to come in. The mosquitoes will come in. And most of these mosquitoes bite you day and night. So the problems just compound on top of each other. And again, much of this is driven by policy, driven by access of really power to be able to change your environment. Because we need to be able to say, stop these transportation, stop all these highways, stop these incinerators in our neighborhood, plant some trees. And when we plant trees, get some dollars to help maintain the trees. So we need our communities to recognize that Black and brown people are most vulnerable and are feeling the effects now, not 10 years from now, not 15 years from now. And our health, our kidneys, our lungs, our skin, our respiratory system, our entire mental health is paying a price right now because our planet has warmed and all the things that we've caused it, the warming, all these greenhouse gases, all these pollution. There's more and more health problems that we could even go through that we have now linked to this warming climate and this pollution.
That is very powerful. It's a lot to take in, Dr. Holder. I have a couple of questions I want to just go back and circle back to, but I want you to hit upon, and you said something on your TED Talk that was very insightful to me, and I never thought about it. You talked about middle class African Americans and how some of the mortality rates are higher in middle class communities of color as well. Can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the data has shown that regardless of your income, Black folks tend to live in communities that are more exposed to air pollution. And it goes back again to the racism and the Jim Crow legislation and the redlining, because they can go on the redlining maps of any city that was redlined. And that was when they identified Black communities and they defunded Black communities, and the property values were reduced in these communities that were redlined. And these communities tend to have hotter temperatures, more pollution, and all of these factors lead to poorer health outcomes. So whether you're rich or poor, because of the previous policies, Black folks were sort of directed into certain communities that put their health at greater risk. I look at maternal premature birth, and they're often now seeing that the communities that were also redlined, that had higher temperatures, they were able to realize that as the dehydration increased, because many of these young moms were outdoors, were taking public transportation. And in South Florida, where I am, most of the bus shelters are not covered. So you're out walking around during your pregnancy because you have the lower resources, and we're seeing a higher level of preterm births. And we feel it's probably related to the dehydration, and which then triggers the blood pressures and complications. So there's more and more, we haven't proven it completely, but we're seeing more and more relationships. And when you look at the data, a college-educated Black woman has the infant mortality rate of a white woman who didn't even graduate from high school. So we know there are factors besides education. And just coming out of these environments, the pollution, the heat, the racism, puts you at greater risk to have poorer health outcomes. And being rich, sure, richer, I won't say rich, but being richer doesn't completely protect you as much as it would in other communities because of the compounding policies that has happened over hundreds of years. I bring up one other thing that we're seeing down here. We're seeing what we call climate gentrification, but it's really migration. The world is seeing a lot of migration out of areas that have been getting more drought. And if you think of the wildfires in California, that is causing a mass migration of people out of those areas into other areas because of the environmental changes that happened. It is so dry because we've had more and more days of heat, the shifting of the rain pattern. So we're having people who are being burnt out of homes. Here in South Florida, we're seeing the climate gentrification because I tell you about how racist structures are. Back in the Jim Crow time in Florida, they put most poor Black communities by the railroad tracks, usually the northwest corner, which is usually the darker corner of the railroad tracks. What we have learned now, as anyone knows engineering, railroad tracks are built on the highest, sturdiest ground. So Black communities happen to have found themselves years ago, what was thought to be undesirable land near the railroad tracks, now turns out to be the least flooded areas in anywhere in Florida, in the southern Florida area. So communities like Liberty City, Little Haiti, Overtown, that were historically Black communities, are now being gentrified. The developers are buying it out because now these communities won't flood. What climate change has done with the warming climate is that the water in the oceans are going into the clouds. So pay attention that when it rains, it's not raining, it always rained hard, but it's raining so much harder in a short amount of time that you're getting more flooding rapidly in areas that never flooded at the level that is flooding now because there's so much more moisture in the clouds. So these poor Black communities that were on high ground never flooded because of the poverty situation, many of these people are renters. And what we're seeing in Liberty City, Little Haiti, Overtown is the movement of poor people out of these areas as developers are building in these higher ground communities. And unfortunately, the poor people are now being moved to 1 feet above sea level places like Florida City and Homestead. And if a storm comes through, I dread to think of what's going to happen with flooding, where poor people have experienced that before where I am. And even more, what has happened incredibly, I just started that Biscayne Boulevard in South Florida, they're going to put a wall that's going to go from 6 feet to about 20 feet high in the middle of Biscayne Boulevard, from 54th Street to 100 and something Street, which basically cuts through the Black community, the poorer Black community. One side of the wall will be protected, and the other side of the wall is going to be closer to the bay, will be flooded. They will save homes that are over $350,000. So already our policies have selected that the rich folks will get funding to help save their homes and everybody else won't. And if you happen to be on the wrong side of the wall, you are really, your property value is going to decline and there's no assistance. The other side of the wall that's going to be protected from the sea level rise have already been bought out by many developers. So when we look at what's happening to people now because of climate change, if we don't act, and I'm not saying just to the little things that we can do, we have to do everything possible, but start advocating for our health, advocating for resources to help prepare us for this, and looking at our poorer communities that are feeling the brunt of it now and in the future really bodes poor outcomes if we don't do something. It's bigger than what coronavirus will be, and it's going to be so detrimental for many, many poor communities and many Black and brown communities, especially in Florida and across the planet.
So, Dr. Holder, you said a lot, and as always, we run short on time. But what you've painted a picture is very much like Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana could hit Florida, and that's where we are. And we know our listeners are all across the country. But as we are powerful women, women of color, and women with our own influencing circles of influence, how do we help this situation? How do we take this knowledge and this information you provided us this morning, and how do we act upon it?
Well, first, look at the short term, the little things you can do. I say one of the easiest little things is give up meat once a week at least, and it helps your health. Any climate solution is a health solution. So we can go into the future time how all this red meat and cattle is creating a lot of problems with our planet and how much greenhouse gases is causing. So if you do that, change all your light bulbs over to LED and higher energy efficiency. Look at how you can stop wasting electricity and securing in your household and making more insulation. So those are some basic things we can do day to day. Walk more, drive less, things that will decrease our production around greenhouse gases. Educate yourself on some of what's happening. Even find out how high your house is above sea level. If you're in Florida, how safe are you? Where are the rivers? Are you near a river basin? See what your personal risk for any of these bad extreme weather events. What's your personal risk? How can you protect yourself? How can you protect your community? So like they say, put on your oxygen mask first, figure out how you're going to secure yourself and your family. Then work with educating yourself on who is advocating. What are the politicians saying? How are we eventually going to stop this warming climate? We have about 10 years to stop the rise and level it off at about 1.5 degrees centigrade. So we can stop the melting of the ice in the Arctic, stop the melting of the ice in Antarctica and Greenland, and try and stabilize our planet. So we have about 5 to 10 years. So personally secure yourself, then start educating and advocating and knowing that we must push the richer countries and push everyone, the politicians, to stop pretending that this is not going to happen, and how we can make the changes rapidly. And understanding that the response must protect the people who are feeling the brunt of the pain now, which are the poor populations. And if the solutions can help the poor populations now, these solutions will help the richer people. Because any solution that we can stop pollution, decrease the temperature, put in more trees, stop our pollution, go into electric vehicles, there's so many things we can do. It is not hopeless, but we have to mobilize our resources and start advocating and educating our communities that they're being hurt now from this climate, and we must do something.
Dr. Holder, as always, you've told us a lot. You've given us some great nuggets. We certainly will take those and in our centers of influence, do what is needed to be done, because that's what it's going to take, all of us, right? It's going to take the health communities, the educational communities. It's going to take all of our organizations to come together to attack this crisis and stop thinking it isn't our problem, because it is our
problem.
It is our problem.
My TED Talk is only 12 minutes, so it's easy to find. And I have a little flyer that I show, which shows the main impacts of heat, of the climate and the warming planet. And think of heat wave and you'll see it, and you won't forget that it's affecting us from head to toe, every aspect of our lives, from our physical problem to our mental well-being. This is here, and we can do some changes, but we have to come together as a community.
Well, we're going to share that information on our website as well as right here on this podcast today, so we can educate all of our guests on this important topic. Dr. Holder, we're going to have you back real soon, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe.
You too.
Bye.
It is my pleasure to introduce a dear friend of mine for some 35 plus years, Marti Forchion Chapman. Marti is the author and creator of A+ College Prep Planner and collegeprepplanner.com. She is an IT professional by profession, but she is a mom extraordinaire. So Marti, welcome to the Sistah Covenant. Thank you for coming to talk with us this morning.
Well, thank you, Pat. Thank you so much for having me on the Sistah Covenant, and thank you to all the listeners for listening in today.
So Marti, let's get right to it. You are a mom, you're a wife, you are a working professional, you're civically engaged in the community, and you have been for some 35 plus years, all the years that I've known you. You are the mother of 3 adult children. Tell us about that. And specifically, let's go back to their high school years, because we know as mothers what that feels like, and all how overwhelming it can be, not just for the teens, but for the parents of the teens. So talk to us a little bit about that and how you navigated all of that during that time.
Okay, well, Pat, as you know, it is very challenging to raise young people today. And my 3 children are 4 years apart in school years. So that means when I had one in high school, I had one in middle school and one in elementary school. So it was really a challenge getting them all settled and keeping up with, regular duties in the household as well as my job, and keeping them engaged so that they would be ready for college and whatever was coming after they left our house.
So Marti, tell us about this ultimate planner. And I know I don't have all the title correct, but the premise of it was for you to get the 3 adults that are successful in their careers today, get them out of high school, get them ready for the college experience and beyond. Tell us about that. How did the idea of the A+ college planner become a reality?
All right. Well, first of all, I am an IT professional. I never thought of myself as an author. And it really came about from trial and error as well as need. Like I said, when my oldest son was just beginning high school, we were just trying to, as parents, get used to having a high schooler and what that would mean. But as he approached, say, 11th grade, we realized that we needed to step it up. We needed to get him engaged, and we needed to become more engaged and learn what the process was. So what I did is I started off creating a spreadsheet, just a simple spreadsheet that I kept track of classes that he took. I created a small resume for him, what I like to call the brag sheet. And, you know, behind the scenes, I was keeping him organized, whether he knew it or not. Well, as he became older, we definitely got him engaged. We had to let him know that, okay, now it's time to think about careers. What do you think you might want to do? Do you want to stay local? Do you want to go out of town? Because we had our children thinking about college throughout their lives, you know, whether it was from my husband and I just talking about our time in college, or just getting them thinking about them being in college and knowing that that was kind of our family standard. And so he knew he was going, but it wasn't until junior year that I think it became real to him. And what I found is that I did not know as much about college prep as I should have known. I knew what I knew from when I went to college, but it's completely different as a high school student versus as a parent with a full-time job and other responsibilities. And that was the number one thing, realizing that I did not know as much as I felt that I should know. And when my daughter came through next, I had so much more information, and I was really using those newfound skills to get her engaged, to let her know that she needed to take ownership. Because maybe with my son, we did a lot more of the background things, but for my daughter, 4 years later, we wanted to make sure she was engaged, that she knew that, you know, college is for you. It's not for us, and you'll be the one doing the work. And in my youngest son's first year of high school, after my two oldest got into college and were actively attending classes, I started writing notes. And it was really just for my children, but a very good friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, Pat, she just said, you know, Marty, you've been making notes, you have these spreadsheets, you have this resume. You need to put that into a book so that you can give it to me, so I can use it for my children. And she doesn't realize it, or maybe she does, but that really made an impact on me, that the things that I was doing could have a great impact on other people. And at that point, I really set about writing the A+ College Prep Planner. And I started off with a basic outline like any other writing task, and it grew. And by the time my youngest son completed high school, I had the A+ College Prep Planner. And then it was just a matter of finding a self-publisher and getting it out there. So that's really what inspired me to write the book.
So Marti, you touched on something. We went to college a little bit ago, right?
A little bit, yes.
We attended the same college, and you're
Yes,
a few years behind me. But it can be overwhelming because things have changed.
Yes.
It's not what it was when we went to college. And if you didn't have a role model then, now you're, as you said, a working parent. You got
That's
all
right.
these moving balls. So taking the A+ planner and talking with our audience today, that mother, that father even that's listening out there, how can you ease their anxiety as we are going back into school? We certainly have some folks on the line that are seniors this year.
That's right.
Give us a quick breakdown. What should they be thinking right now today as we sit at the middle of August? What should they be thinking so that they're not overwhelmed when the clock starts ticking as we go from SATs to applications to acceptance letters?
Well, this will be a very anxious year, no matter what I tell those parents. But what I will say is to have faith that what you've been telling your children through the years, it's in there. You know, it's packaged within them, and they were listening. It may not always seem like it, but a lot of times they have been listening. They've been watching you. So if you've been setting a good example, they will be preparing themselves. I would say, as far as the applications and the process, I would say focus on what matters most in college admissions, which would be their grades, their test scores, their extracurriculars, and their personal statement, which is the college essay. And I think a lot of people don't realize how important that college essay is, but get them working on that now. Find out what the prompts are for the colleges that they're interested in. Those are the topics for those college essays, and help them to formulate ideas, use their resources, whether it's their parents, their teachers, their counselors at the school can review those for them and help them to develop a good format for their personal statements. Their grades, for the most part, are there. Their test scores, if they have not had the SAT or ACT, make sure to get those scheduled. It's preferable to take the tests at least twice. Once is fine and once is enough. You can take them as many times as you like, but the first time they're always a bit nervous. So if you can, book another chance so they have another opportunity to prepare for that test and take it again. And as far as applications, help them to find out what kinds of colleges will work best for them. What will be the best fit? Do they want a small college? Are they a quiet student and they want to be somewhere, you know, nice and cozy? Or do they want the big university experience, which is what I wanted? But help them to find out what they like, not what you like, but what they like, because they will ultimately be the ones who have to live there or have to deal with the professors and the environment. So help them to find out what they like, help them to think about careers. It's difficult when you're a teenager to figure out what you want to do with your whole life, but help them to see what they're good at, what they're not so good at, and to develop that independence.
You mentioned even as early as 7th grade.
Oh, yeah.
So is it an age, a magic age that you should start having these conversations, maybe going on these college tours as you go on vacation? Do you have something you can impart on our audience around the time frame?
I think definitely by middle school, you should be gently suggesting the whole idea of college. If you attended college yourself, you know, take your child to that campus. We did that. We took our children to our alma mater, Florida State, and we just walk around campus and talk about our memories there, and, you know, good and bad memories. You know, you want it to be a true representation of the experience, and they will absorb all of that, and they'll see the kinds of things that they like and don't like. It's fine to start when they're very young, even elementary school, just so they know what a college is. And as they get older, help them to see other things. It's always great to visit a campus and actually go in a classroom, maybe eat in the cafeteria. We did that with our children. And just get comfortable with the concept of further education, because I really think it's about furthering your education, whether it's a 4-year university or it's a trade school. You know, I just believe that education is a lifelong thing, and the sooner you engage them, the better the result will be.
Well, Marti, all of that is amazing. Again, as you said early on, it's going to be dynamic year.
Yes.
If you're a senior, it's going to be dynamic for you and your parent, but obviously getting ahead of it, purchasing your A+ college planner, and it'll be on our website. You are our Sistah of the Month. So
And thank you so much.
it's on our website right now, but certainly you are a wealth of information. So I know some of our listeners will be getting in touch with you, but I've often told you what you and Mark done to raise your kids is nothing short of amazing. They are amazing young folks, and I want them to mentor my 2 young folks, because that's what it's about, and that's what the village is about. So thank you.
That's what it's about.
I appreciate you taking the time to come talk with us, and I more appreciate you putting that planner together, because I used it myself, so I know how it works. So thank you, Marti.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
You'll be back, I'm sure. Take care.
Thank you.
So as always, my sisters, this has been amazing. But what I want to say to you right now is, if you love your family and your friends, hold them tight. These are unprecedented times. Get the vaccination if you can. Stay healthy, stay vigilant and safe. Love your family and your friends, and encourage everyone you know to get vaccinated if they can. And as always, be bold, be brilliant, be brave and beautiful, my sisters, and be blessed.